you hear a lot of I hear people talking about when they talk about writing, finding a voice for your writing. I mean, I was talking to Opti at one point, and he was talking about, like finding a voice, and is that something? How do you? Is that something that you think about with every character that you're writing? They have a unique voice.
Again, that kind of depends. There's a lot more room for every character to have a unique voice in a longer product where you can be more
Sure.
consistent about that voice. I adore first person narratives. I think that's half the reason the Jimmy Kincaid stories are so fun, is because you're right in this guy's head, and because that also works and plays off of the tropes of the old school black and white kind of PI noir
Yeah.
sort of characters. It works both ways.
Yeah, I find it easier to write from a first person perspective as well. I don't know what it is, or I can't really explain it, but I feel like it's just easier for me to express ideas when I'm trying to think from that character's perspective. It's easier for me to describe it through their eyes, you know?
Yeah, well, and when you're telling a story to your buddy, it's I, it's me,
Right.
and I think that just makes it kind of flow more naturally. And I think when you're doing a first person narrative, there's so much more room for that individual voice. I mean, I use all sorts of contractions and stuff in Jimmy Kincaid's prose, because you're getting his idea of what he's looking at. And I think that just it lets you kind of, and if anything, it's another kind of lantern jawed PI trope to go kind of melodramatic and really heavy handed with that stuff. And look at, so it's different.
So do you is there anything that you do to try to get in to character, so to speak, when you're writing for, like, let's say you're writing Kincaid? Is there something that you do to kind of like prepare yourself? Do you
Not really. I think part of the reason Kincaid works is because he actually just comes really easily to me.
yeah.
So it doesn't take a lot of effort to get there. I like a lot of, the old school, detective books. I adore a lot of the new school detective books, especially the Boston ones, the Dennis Lehane and stuff. I adore those, and a lot of those same narrative tropes, and the neighborhood kid from the part of town that he's working in with one foot on both sides of the line, and
Yeah.
all those old PI tropes, and they just work so well for Shadowrun too, and so yeah, it comes pretty easy to me. I do try to give every character a different voice. It's harder in short stuff, and even if the short stuff is just a chapter, like when you're going from character to character in a novel, if they have different point of views in each chapter, it's tough to make it a clear enough delineation from
So that's
character to
that's the tough
character.
part um getting that message across, get or adequately portraying that the voice is
I think
changing.
the tough part, depending on how many characters you're using, is showing that you're doing it on purpose. Like
Right,
you've got
right.
to make it obvious enough to make it clear that you're establishing a pattern. That the Decker notices certain things, the Shaman notices other stuff, the Rigger notices different stuff, the Street Sam notices, and it's tough to kind of balance that sometimes. I think I did a good job. Hopefully it works out. But even in the SR5 intro fic, when I introduced Sledge and Gentry and Koydog in them, we were switching point of view several times because I wanted each character to kind of shine differently. And it's tricky. It definitely makes it tougher. But yeah, it's fun. It definitely feels different doing a third person than a first person. Some recent fiction I'm working on this Patreon thing we'll talk about later is first person, but he's just like an office geek. He's
Sure.
a corporate kind of salary man, working IT for Neonet, and it's a very different first person perspective than the kind of you know whiskey husk voice of Jimmy Kincaid walking the dark streets of Puyallup.
Right,
Is this guy
right.
bitching about his boss, in his office in NeoNet headquarters. So it's not always tied to the first person versus third person, sort of thing.